So every year when I come here, I always get this email from Mother Sukava. Can you speak on this subject? And I say, of course. And so she has chosen the subject, and I'm not to blame. Well, at least not directly, anyway. So, anyway, it is a very, what we say, important principle in our devotional life, and it's the foundation for us to be able to move forward when things are stuck. And the topic is forgiveness, which is very, very essential principle in order to practice Krishna consciousness successfully. So this verse is chosen from the 9th canto, chapter 15, verse number 40. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Shamaya Rochitam Lakshmir.
Shamaya Rochitam Lakshmir.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Tusyate Hari Ishvaraha.
Tusyate Hari Ishvaraha.
Shamaya Rochite Lakshmir.
Shamaya Rochite Lakshmir.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Tusyate Hari Ishvaraha.
Tusyate Hari Ishvaraha.
Shamaya Rochite Lakshmir.
Shamaya Rochite Lakshmir.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Tusyate Hari Ishvaraha.
Tusyate Hari Ishvaraha.
Shamaya Rochate Lakshmir.
Shamaya Rochate Lakshmir.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Brahmisari Yata Prabha.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Shaminamasu Bhagavan.
Tusyate Hari
Tusyate Hari Ishvaraha.
Simply by forgiving,
Simply by forgiving,
Rochite
Rochate
becomes pleasing.
becomes pleasing.
Lakshmi,
Lakshmi,
the goddess of fortune.
goddess of fortune.
Brahmi,
Brahmi,
in connection with Brahminical qualifications.
in connection with Brahminical qualifications.
Shauri,
Shauri,
the sun god.
the sun god.
Yata,
Yata,
as.
as.
Prabha,
Prabha,
the sunshine.
the sunshine.
Shaminam,
Shaminam,
unto the Brahmanas,
unto the Brahmanas,
who are so forgiving.
who are so forgiving.
Asu,
Asu,
very soon.
very soon.
Bhagavan,
Bhagavan,
the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Tusyate,
Tusyate,
becomes pleased.
becomes pleased.
Hari,
Hari,
the Lord.
the Lord.
Ishvaraha,
Ishvara,
the Supreme Controller.
the Supreme Controller.
Let's see who's speaking here. Not sure. Maybe Sons of Kapivari Arjuna. Okay, the duty of a Brahmin is to cultivate, the duty of a Brahmin is to culture the quality of forgiveness, which is illuminating like the sun. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is pleased for those who are forgiving. Please repeat, the duty of a Brahmana
The duty of the Brahmana
is to culture the quality of forgiveness,
is to culture the quality of forgiveness,
which is illuminating like the sun.
which is illuminating like the sun.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari,
The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari,
is pleased by those who are forgiving.
is pleased by those who are forgiving.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. different personalities become beautiful by possessing different qualities. Chanakya Pandit says that the cuckoo bird, although very black, is beautiful because of its sweet voice. Similarly, a woman becomes beautiful by her chastity and faithfulness to her husband, and an ugly person becomes beautiful when he becomes a learned scholar. In the same way, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras become beautiful by their qualities. Brahmanas are beautiful when they are forgiving. Kshatriyas when they are heroic and never retreat from fighting. Vaishyas when they enrich cultural activities and protect cows, and Sudras when they are faithful in discharge of duties pleasing to their masters. Thus, everyone becomes beautiful by special qualities. And the special quality of a Brahman is described here is forgiveness. Om Agyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksu Umilitam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Astyatya Satarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So here we see that there are certain outstanding qualities that apply to certain personalities. When they exhibit these qualities, they become very attractive, very beautiful. To others and to themselves, and also in their execution of devotional service. So here what is being focused on is the Brahminical quality of forgiveness. Now, sometimes people may misinterpret this purport by saying, well, only the Brahmanas have to be forgiven. Because it says here, a Kshatriya becomes beautiful by heroic duties, Vaishyas by protecting cows, and Sudras by performing service to others in a pleasing way. But this applies to all those who engage in devotional service. And so forgiveness is actually one of the, what we say, ornaments of a Vaishnava. Because actually a Vaishnava is above the Brahman. The Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudras in the different ashramas are simply within the Varnashram system, and they are considered to be material. But Vaishnava is spiritual. And therefore, the quality of forgiveness enhances the quality of spirituality in the life and the execution of one who is a Vaishnava. So forgiveness is a very, what we say, complex issue, and how one practices that and how one deals with it is very much, we say, relevant to the situation at hand. But we have examples in the Shastras, and some really powerful examples, how Daksha, he was very, very, we say, offensive to his son-in-law, Lord Shiva, who was a very powerful controller. Lord Shiva's Mahadev, and he's practically on the level of Lord Vishnu. So Daksha was very much blessed by being connected with such a person through his family relationship, but he couldn't appreciate that. He was thinking he was actually superior to Lord Shiva. Why? Because Shiva was his son-in-law, and therefore the father-in-law thinks that the son-in-law is inferior. This is ordinary parlance. People think like that. He's my son-in-law, therefore I'm his father-in-law. So there's this mentality of being in a better position. So that was the thinking of Daksha. Now, we know the story how he offended Lord Shiva, but Lord Shiva forgave him. but still he had to suffer afterwards. So you might think, well, Lord Shiva was forgiving, why did he have to suffer? Because Lord Shiva didn't give him his favor. That in the process of forgiveness, favor also has to come. So one may be forgiving but not favorable to the offender. And Shiva was not favorable because he knew the mentality of Daksha. And therefore, because of that, Daksha, in his next life, took birth in a lower. He was born in a Kshatriya family, and he also again committed offense to Narada Muni, which was due to the residue of his offensive mentality that he still had from his previous life, and therefore he went down even farther. So the element of point here is that if one is forgives an offender, or one is forgives an offender, still they have to get the favor. Because if they don't get the favor of the person, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead doesn't take that offense very lightly. So it says that one may be forgiven, but at the same time, Krishna has to be happy. In other words, that person has to favor you. In other words, everything has to be clean. Otherwise, that residue of that offense continues. So that was the effects of Shiva. Now we have the example of complete forgiveness where, Ravana, he had offended Ram by stealing Sita, and Ram gave him so many chances. He said, all you have to do is give back Sita and then you can live in your kingdom. I won't really try to destroy you. But Ravana was obstinate, lusty, couldn't understand the position of Ram, and he was overwhelmed by his own material, lusty desires. And so in order to help him get relieved of that, the Lord had to kill him. So that was his retribution, and he became purified by that killing. Now, the Lord told Vibhishan, which was Ravana's younger brother, who now had become a devotee of the Lord, had given up his allegiance to his brother, and the Lord wanted to honor Ravana in the sense that he wanted to honor his soul. So he told him, you perform the last rites for your departed brother. And Vibhishan was reluctant to do that because he knew how sinful his brother was and how offensive he was. But the Lord said, no, actually he is now purified, and we are not seeing him as the body of Ravana anymore, we are seeing him as the soul. So for the soul is always purified in all stages of life. And therefore Ram was seeing it in that way, and then Vibhishan went ahead. And therefore the Lord was showing that actually now there was no residue of any offense, and therefore he should be honored in his death. And of course, he got a glorious death, getting killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes devotees think, maybe I should try that. But it doesn't work if you plan it. If you don't plan it, maybe something may happen, but that's also quite remote. But here we see that situation. We have another example in the Shastras, which is even more outstanding, is Vidura and Dhritarashtra. Vidura was the moral and moral guide for basically the Pandava family and also the Kuru family. And so he would always give moral instruction, seeing that his elder brother Dhritarashtra, although he was the king, was on this adventure to destroy the Pandavas. He tried to explain to him that these Pandavas are innocent, they are their rightful kingdom, and therefore you shouldn't favor your rascal son Duryodhana. But he couldn't hear. It says that he was blind in two ways, physically and spiritually. He wasn't able to hear good instructions. And therefore, they say if you give good instructions to a person who is somewhat envious or angry, they become more of the same. And that's what happened. So rather than appreciating the good instructions of Vidura, he banned him from the kingdom. And Vidura left. And after some time, he came to his senses and he actually forgave Vidura and called him back. And Vidura realized that he was very heavily offended by his brother, but he didn't take offense. He simply understood this is the nature of this person. Therefore, I forgive him. But one thing he didn't do, he didn't trust him. So this is also an element that works in relationship to forgiveness. Forgive but don't trust. Because trust may also open up the door to further discretions, further offenses. So in the case of Vidura used that lack of trust so he could monitor his brother's activities and continue to give him more instructions. And therefore he kept the door open where he could actually reform, which he did. So he was the well-wisher of his brother. But by not allowing that trust to manifest, it allowed Vidura to keep the position of being the instructor and at the same time be careful not to become offended again. This is an interesting point. We use it as a cliche, forgive but don't trust. Now, does trust ever really manifest again? Only when the person who has caused the offense is actually seen to be completely repentant and reformed in activities. That doesn't usually happen at the beginning. But when that does, after some time, then trust may begin. So forgiveness is not for the person who is offended. It's for the person who is the offender. It's for the person who is offended. One who becomes offended or feels offended, if they hold this grudge or this attitude of lack of forgiveness towards that person, then they suffer more than the person. I was giving a lecture in Bhaktivedanta Manor, I remember it's about 5 or 6 years ago. And the topic was on Vaishnava relationships. So right after the class, there was questions, but this lady wanted to speak privately, so she came up to me. In a very, kind of like, she was somewhat unhappy, disturbed, maybe something I said. So she came up to me and she said, you know, Maharaj, you're talking about forgiveness, but I can't do it. I can't do it. I have this problem with this one person who offended me, and I just can't forgive her. I said, well, how long ago was that? She said, 25 years. I almost fell off my chair. How is it possible to hold that kind of negativity for such a long period of time? Well, what can I do to somehow relieve her of her anxiety? I said, you have to practice that, because actually there's statistics. There's one man called Fred Ruskin. He wrote one book, and that was about forgiveness. And he documented that those who don't practice forgiveness, they are more tendency to ill health. It actually destroys one's health if it's kept in a long period of time. So in this case, this idea of letting go is actually beneficial for one's own, what we say, peace of mind. But sometimes it becomes difficult because we think either we have to get back at the person or do something or pray that Krishna smashes them. Have you ever prayed like that? No, don't pray like that. But that could also be some form of thought that one may also, decide to entertain, which just causes more and more negativity. But the general principle is to learn how to forgive, but at the same time, don't always immediately give that trust there. And then another way to see when some discretion or some offense comes your way, what did I do to deserve this? And this is the karmic aspect of this. Is there something about me that has caused Krishna or the material energy to act in such a way that this person is giving me a reaction for my activity? And generally this is more or less the case. We find sometimes we see that when you do something to someone, sometimes you notice just right after that, or maybe a little later, the same thing happens to you. And you think, oh yeah, now I understand why it happened. I mean, sometimes it's not so immediate, but it does happen like that. So a lot of times we can see, and as Prabhupada used this, he said, don't be disturbed by the instrument of your karma. So a lot of times, it's hard to really judge. You have to judge each of the situations according to time, place, person, circumstance, and so many ingredients that made up the activity. But a lot of times, it's just we're learning a lesson, or getting a reaction that helps us learn the lessons. Reactions are some ways to learn lessons in our spiritual life, or learn lessons on how to take more shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's one of the ways to deal with situations like that. When somehow one feels offended, immediately the mind goes to different levels of what we know. They're wrong, I'm cheated, so many things. And that the way to somehow say, why is Krishna allowing this to happen to me, or why is Krishna making this happen to me? He allows it, or he maybe wants it. He has two aspects of his nature. For some reason he may allow it, and other reasons, when it's more direct and severe, he may want it to happen for some punishment. You see the example of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni. I mean, Ambarish Maharaj was a saintly king. He didn't commit any offense at all. He simply apparently made a discretion in the execution of some ritual. But Durvasa Muni was envious. He was envious of the king, and so he looked for some fault. And looking for some fault, he decided to take some action. The action was so severe that he actually wanted to kill Ambarish Maharaj. And of course, Ambarish Maharaj immediately took shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with complete faith and devotion. And Krishna Shudarshan Chakra was immediately present in the life of Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni had to go everywhere in order to get away from that chakra. He went to Lord Brahma's abode. Brahma said, Vishnu's chakra. He went to Shiva. Shiva, he's an expansion of Lord Shiva. Shiva said, you blew it. So many ways, he wasn't able to. Finally, he went to Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu said, actually, I can't do anything either. I'm helpless. I'm tied by the love of my devotee. My devotee's love keeps me under their control. And therefore, because you have offended my devotee, I can't do anything. Only my devotee can relieve you of that offense. He got a wake-up call, took shelter of the lotus feet of Ambarish Maharaj. Of course, Ambarish Maharaj didn't even consider that he had been offended. He was so humble. And sometimes we might also think like that. If someone commits some discretion or acts in a bad way or causes us, we might think, well, if I was in that situation, because sometimes we use this as a therapy, when people who have this have become offended and they can't get rid of it, what would you have done if you were in that other person's position in relationship to the situation? You might also think like that. And sometimes we think, oh yes, maybe I would have acted in the same way. And so, therefore, that helps to diffuse a little bit of the hurt that comes by way of... So there's different ways, but ultimately, as it says here, it's an ornament of a Vaishnava, of forgiveness. And we find that this is so, what we say, fundamental to living, because every day, not every day, but it seems like it's quite happens, something does something to someone to disturb you. Sometimes you expect someone to be friendly to you and you get the opposite. Or you're friendly to someone else and they don't respond at all. In other words, we always find that in interpersonal relationships, there's something lacking to make it, what we say, pleasant, pleasing, communicable, something. So, therefore, of course, tolerance is the principle that allows forgiveness to manifest. But forgiveness is the essential quality of a devotee. And we find, there was a story, I don't know all the details, but I had heard this story that the Amish community up in Pennsylvania, one crazy man came into the Amish community with a gun and started shooting up the whole community. This happened about 10 years ago, maybe you heard this, yeah. And of course, so many people were killed, the man was arrested. And then the authorities came to the Amish, and the Amish said, we forgive him. We understand that he is just sick, and therefore a sick man we don't want to see him punished. They actually forgave him. Now this is pretty much amazing when you think about it. He actually killed many of their members. So we can see extreme examples how when people are actually very close to God and understand that they're in that relationship with God, that there's nothing that anybody can do to me that hurt my relationship with God. And therefore, if I'm forgiving, then this is the nature. And also, there's one other principle that I like to think. What have I done that has caused me to be, what we say, slighted again? Of course, that's the karmic thing. And that way, one doesn't take these things. But in one way is to stop suffering by holding this negativity towards others. It's your own suffering. We either clam up or we blow up, right? If we clam up, then that energy goes internally and it destroys our peace of mind and also our health. If we blow up, then we somehow or other can cause more damage. So the formula, there's 3 options: forgive and forget. That's not the main one. There's one is forgive but don't forget, or forgive and don't trust. And the third one is to redress the issue with the person involved and try to somehow or other sort it out through communications. These are 3 options that we more or less have. There may be more that I haven't considered, but these are the 3 main ones. Personally, I like the one forgive but don't forget, because we don't want to get hurt again. But forgiveness is for the one who has been hurt. So we're running close to the end of class. Any questions, comments on this principle of forgiveness? Yes, Mother Sukama. Thank you for choosing the topic.
One comment and one question about the Amish community. There's actually a book written on it. I think it's called Amazing Grace. He didn't just come into the community, he went into the school and killed a bunch of children.
With school,
Yeah, and so the parents forgave him. So that was maybe a little bit more intense. And then the question is, so, a devotee like Ambarish Maharaj, he forgave Dravasa, he didn't even consider it an offense. But if a person isn't even admitting a mistake or even asking for forgiveness, and maybe thinking that, I'll just chant and that offense will just get dissipated by Krishna, is that story hold true, that Krishna won't necessarily let that go until you kind of realize you made a mistake, something like that?
Well, there's the statement by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is mentioned in Antya Lila, where those who blaspheme and offend devotees, it's like drinking poison. And those who glorify the devotees is like drinking nectar. Those who repeatedly offend devotees, he says that my holy name destroys them. Even if they're chanting the holy name, that holy name destroys them. That's a statement by Mahaprabhu. So we have to be very, what we say, how Krishna sees it, generally, if one is sincerely trying to overcome whatever offense that but if they don't recognize that they actually committed an offense, or need to be in the position of asking forgiveness, they may go on. Therefore, the person who is offended shouldn't trust that person. And sometimes we distance ourselves in order not to get hurt again. That's the main thing, because by getting hurt again, or allowing that thing to repeat, that person who does it commits another offense. And so it's bad for them also. So does that help? I can't see you anymore. Okay. Oh, okay, yeah.
Hey, Maharaj.
Yes, Prabhu.
Just-
Yes.
I'm just-
Vraha, Prabhu.
Maharaj.
Vraha.
Maharaj, since you went down this road, if you could speak just a little something about Vaishnava Aparad, because that's really the heavy.
Vaishnava Aparad, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in one, I'm not exactly sure what scripture is written, but he says there's 6 ways to offend a Vaishnava, and he starts from the most severe way. The first way is to kill a Vaishnava. That's the most severe. Second is to blaspheme a Vaishnava. What is blaspheme? Blasphemy means you have many good qualities, but there's some discretion or some flaw that I'm looking for. I find that flaw, and I broadcast that as your personality. And that's what Daksha did to Shiva. Down from that, less offense is to be envious of a Vaishnava. Less than that is to become angry at a Vaishnava. The next one down is not to give respects to a Vaishnava. And the last one is not to feel happy when you see a Vaishnava. So, what do you do with that one? That's the least severe, but the antidote for that lack of proper mentality is to offer your obeisances. If you're not feeling happy, just offer your obeisances and then there's no offense. So that's Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Each one requires some, further explanations, but that's the general
Good ones.
listing, yeah. Yes, Nityodita Prabhu. Uh-oh. I got my garland.
In the course of living, it seems that there's always something that we do that offends others.
Some unconsciously.
Excuse me?
Unconsciously, a lot of times.